Hello, welcome to the account software. I thought of creating a series of videos, a tutorial, so that we can uh, try to use this application and see the purpose of this. The account software is mainly created for a CPA, where CPA handles many users and they handles their bank accounts and then tries to prepare taxes for him. Okay. It's mainly intended for a CPA. So CPA will have many users. Uh, so and for each user, he should maintain a database and he should have information about how he maintains all his bank accounts. And each user is totally separate. Is totally different, he, this tool should be flexible so that the CPA can configure based on the user needs. So that's the purpose of it. In the end, just to see what this software is about, uh, to start with, one-time activities, two one-time activities are required. Set up a directory for the user where his accounts will be stored. Let me go ahead and try to do that here. So let me create a user called user1. So anything related to user1, whether bank accounts or any configuration, anything will be stored under user1. So let's start with that assumption. Let me go ahead and create user2. Although in this tutorial I will not be covering anything related to user2, but so the directory for user1 is created. Okay. Now the second one-time activity that's required is give information about how user handles his accounts. How many bank accounts he has, how many properties he has, how does he spend for how in which bank account does he use for a particular property, or does he try to use one bank account for 3 or 4 different properties. So all that information should be given, but it's just one-time activity. But year after year, the CPA doesn't have to do that. So that's the advantage. And the tax software takes that information, which just a very readable information that CPA can provide, and then it prepares the tax form Schedule E. It just, in the end, this is what you'll get just by feeding the bank accounts. What's the input required for the software? Well, it requires 3 different kinds of inputs. One is we have to create a list of bank accounts. We have to create a list of rental properties. I do like to extend this for future different kinds of investments, but right now it's just rental properties and bank accounts. So once the bank accounts and rental properties are created, the next step is to import the bank statements. And the tax software already understands various banks like Wells Fargo, TCU, Amex. It knows how to parse those statements. But it's very easily, it can be extended to other formats. And none of those format is hard-coded in the software. Everything is driven through configuration file. Like for example, I'll show that example later. Okay, maybe here. So the format of each bank statements is kind of, it can say on which column number the date appears, which column number the description appears, in which column number the amount appears. So that information is just fed in as input, and once all the bank statements are imported, then the processing starts. The account software automatically classifies each and every transaction based on the information that's provided by the CPA. And then the output of this will be a tax form, a Schedule E that we just showed you, and it also gives an Excel sheet as an output, because CPAs love Excel sheet. They want to do any manipulation, they can use the Excel sheet, and this Excel sheet, whatever manipulation they do, can be fed back to the software, and again it can be exported and again fed back, and that cycle continues till his satisfactorily comes out with the final Excel sheet. It can be done for a year, for the whole year, or partial year. So if you want to see how you are doing on your rental properties, or you're making money, or if you want to increase your spending, you do some renovations, you could do. All those advantages comes because everything is automated. The only thing required is a one-time activity about the user to say how he manages his accounts. So far so good. Let us try to run the software. So if you have loaded this from GitHub and you try to run this, it should, all it needs is just Java and Eclipse. It should be able to run and it should give you the usage. If it's not giving, then it's something problem with the setup, not with the software. So as long as you're able to see this usage, and that's good. Any dependency this software has is there in the lib directory. All the libraries it needs is already there in the lib directory. It doesn't have any other external dependencies. Having said that, let's see the usage. First, it's create accounts, list accounts, delete accounts. That's pretty straightforward. And what it takes as input is a file. That's interesting. We don't give the account name, bank account name, bank name, and all those. We're just giving a file as input, because once the reason being, like, the list of bank accounts should be a CSV file that is kept for the user. Tomorrow, if you want to delete and clean up and redo this exercise, it should be pretty straightforward to do that. And that's the whole idea of getting a file as input. For delete also, we are taking the file as input, and then list accounts, and then create properties, list properties, delete properties. The groups will come to that later. It's too early to jump onto that. Properties are the rental properties, by the way. And the third thing that we need to do is import the bank statements. As you can see, a CSV file, the bank statements, and then we give the account name as input. And next is to classify and then export. That's it. 4 or 5 different options. Create accounts, create properties. These are all one-time activities. Once that is done, all you have to do is import the bank statement, classify, export. And if you want to modify the Excel sheet, you can always modify and then import that Excel sheet back. So far so good. So let's try to let's try to create a bank account, because that's required. If you try to do anything like, let's try to parse import DB, rather than let's try to create accounts here. Configuration. Although file is a mandatory argument, let's see what happens. So it says -file argument is required. Okay, so let's go ahead and give a file as argument. So what's that file? It's a CSV file. Let's look at a sample CSV file. In fact, I should change the usage. Usage should be saying a CSV file instead of F. It will be confusing for users if we don't do that. Okay, let's try to create accounts and it takes a CSV file as argument. So far so good. I prepared one. Let's look at what this CSV file contains. So it is saying the property and which bank do we use to use accounts for the property. So we have a list of banks here. So let's go ahead and give that as input. So let's go ahead and give that as input. Okay, let's try to run it now. Okay, now it is saying it needs a property accounts DB and to be set to the directory where the accounts repository for that user needs to be created. That means all the accounts for that particular user will be kept under a directory, and the directory is referred to by this property. So we earlier created this property for user 1. Let's go ahead and set this Java property. What is that property name? Accounts DB. Okay, let's see what happens. Using Eclipse link for JPA, and it went ahead and created all these accounts, the accounts that we gave in the CSV file as input. And you can also see that under the user1 directory it has created two different directories. One is taxdb. This is where the database is created. That's a Derby database. And then it has got a config directory. Now what is this config directory? As you can see, it has information about how to parse Wells Fargo statements, DCU statements, BB&T, Amex. It has got information about how to parse that. Okay, if you want to add more, you can always add more. If you have your own bank, this software doesn't restrict you to use only these banks. You can add more types, as in when you have more banks, you can add more types in here. You can also see a very interesting file here called taxcategory.txt. What it means is, okay, rental and company. In future we wanted to add more, so that's why I had two different types there. And then transaction types. You can see there is rent, commission, insurance, professional fees, all the stuff which maps to the stuff in here. And professional fees, all the stuff, professional fees. So it maps to the tax items. So far so good. So when you created a new user and you created accounts for him, it created a new database, brand new database, and then it created a config directory where some standard banks which the software already knows have been created. Users can go ahead and add more banks, and this taxdb has this banks already created. In fact, if you have Squirrel, you could log into this account and see what's in there. So let's go ahead and do a list account and see what happens. Okay, before I do that, let me copy this as a sample usage. So I want to document this somewhere sometime. Now it's connecting to the database and getting the list of banks, that's all. So you can see the banks have been created. It's a minor detail that each of these accounts are not imported into the same table. Each of the bank accounts is going into a different table. You can see the table ID on which it's going. So you can always work on only one, or you can just mess with only one and don't worry about changing the others. So far so good. The accounts has been created. The next step is to create properties. Okay. Before I do that, I think we can stop this tutorial and start the tutorial and a second tutorial again. So to recap, what this software is about is it's for a CPA where he handles multiple users, and for each user there has to be a different way the user maintains the configuration. That information should be given by the CPA. We have not gone to this step yet. However, we covered this where a directory was created for the user, and this software requires bank accounts as inputs, rental properties as inputs. We have not covered this part yet. Importing bank statements, we have not covered this yet, and the processing and then the output. We'll cover these details in the next tutorial.